Hello.
Hello.
Oh, this is
Hello.
exciting.
Hello.
We're furthering the conversation of sewing into patchwork and quilting. Carol, just give us an introduction, please.
Well, I'll start by saying I've never made a quilt, but I'd love to. And I wanted to have a chat with Louisa here. And Louisa and I are related by a family marriage. And I grew up in Michigan. Louisa still lives in Michigan. And she is, I don't have to explain this. Just look at where she's sitting.
It's
Look at what
wonderful, isn't
around
it?
her. She's got like every every name of the craft. And so it looks like you're very busy. And I guess I'd like you and Stuart to talk about what is very much more your world than mine, and that is quilting. But first of all, Louisa, I'm curious, where did you learn your skills? I mean, I grandmother taught mom and then taught me, and that's how it was. But today, with all the social media and the change in how we can resource, how did you acquire your skills?
Absolutely. A great question. And thank you, Carol, for inviting me here. I'm very humbled by this, as you know. And this is really a thrill for me to even talk about crafting or sewing or any of this. These are my favorite subjects. When I was younger, it was really self-taught per se with needle and thread, and
Mhm.
I had to think back, when did I start sewing? And it was kind of self-taught with the sewing machine. My mom had a sewing machine,
Mm,
but she wasn't really a
mhm,
sewer.
mm,
But she did come to this country with a lot of fabric. That was something that I knew I had access to. It's just
mhm.
something that was given to them when they came over to America. And so I knew I could kind of snip away at her supply. And of course, it
Right.
was just really making things on my own for, Barbies and my dolls and such.
Oh,
But the sewing part of it came in like using the sewing machine school. I mean, they taught it in high school at one point. So that
oh,
was,
that's right. Yep.
yeah,
Hmm.
as you probably
Hmm.
remember home
Yep.
economics.
We had home ec as well. Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. So kind of learning that and then just the patterns and just out of
Mhm.
necessity, like home decorating or maybe costumes for the children or but the
Right.
pattern is kind of self-taught and you just learn, you
Okay.
learn from just doing. So that was where I
Oh,
began and then from there,
Wonderful.
good old
Wonderful.
and
old
and
Yeah.
YouTube
did you move
and
to
yeah.
YouTube at all, Louisa? Because
Oh
I
my
have to say
goodness,
I'm a
yes.
YouTube learner. I've patchwork and you
Oh my
quilting.
goodness.
Have you gone into that now? Has that helped
Oh,
teach more?
fast forward, yes, fast forward to now, absolutely. Yeah. So YouTube has been just
Mm.
incredible. I mean, and if we didn't have those resources back then, obviously, but
No.
No.
boy,
Oh, I
now
know.
you can find and so many creative people out there. I
Mm.
am just so
Mhm.
impressed and the creative process of doing anything intrigues me. So when
Mm.
quilting kind of came around again, it was just by circumstance that I started following someone that brought up a certain type of fabric designer. His name, Kaffe Fassett, and I hope I'm pronouncing that
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
And then from there, it took us from uh, that to ironically at that Christmas, I'd asked for quilting supplies. So my family started send got me some fabrics and some just fun
Oh.
fabrics. And then they gave me a Cafe Facette book of quilts. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, these
Oh,
are beautiful.
yeah.
The fabrics were, I don't know if you know, Stuart, if you recall,
Yeah,
yes.
he's
So
he's big over
Stuart,
here, and I know many people struggle
is
with
he?
his saying his name. We say Kaffe Fassett,
Cave
and
Facette.
Hey,
Thank you.
hey.
he
Mm.
is
I
an
am probably,
artist.
yeah, I
He is a
apologize
wonder
for
with
that.
color. So
Oh,
so the fabric companies have picked up on him, and
oh,
also the wool companies too. And he
yeah.
designs fabric and colorways and designs in
Oh,
both
Mm.
fields. And his use of color is phenomenal, isn't it?
Mm.
phenomenal, phenomenal. And I
Mm.
just loved it. And then, yeah, and then so that takes you to what people are doing with their fabrics and even just the avenue of purchasing fabric other than my local fabric store. There wasn't a huge selection. I mean, there is, but nothing as unique and beautiful as what I was seeing on Instagram and online.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so then you start ordering just things online, and Yeah, then you get introduced to these beautiful fabrics. It's like, what are we going to do with them? So that part of it, yeah. So
Well,
that's where
let's talk about that then. So you got some
yeah,
Kaffe Fassett fabric then for your
I
first
did.
ever
I did.
quilt.
I did. Yes. And the most popular one I was noticing, or the one that intrigued me the most, and I saw a woman, a lovely woman that I follow on YouTube. Her name is Kate. The Last Homely
Oh
House, I think is
yes, yeah,
her.
yeah, very
Yeah, do
She's
you
from
know
popular.
Kate?
England, isn't
She
she?
She
is.
is.
She's
Oh
Yeah.
my
from
gosh,
England.
she's
Yeah.
such a joy to watch. I just,
Mhm.
she's just in her home in England and she's quilting and she's so calm and talking about it in such a fun way. So with that being said, she was doing the seed packet quilt. And then I'm like, that is what I want to do. This looks so fun because you are showcasing all those beautiful
Yeah.
blooms that are
Mhm.
part of that collective. The designs. I think Philip Jacobs has a part in that also. Um, but yeah, so from there, it just you got the kit. You bought a kit,
Okay.
and
So
the
so
kit
you
would
bought the
have
kit and the fabric was
yes.
pre-cut, or did it come as yardage and you had to cut the fabric?
So yes, so great question. It really it is you first you choose like do you want more of the reds and pinks
Mhm.
Yeah.
and that is one kit, or do you prefer the blues and purples, and that's another kit. And I went with the pinks and reds, and with that being said, they send you yardage,
Yeah.
anything from a quarter yard to 2/3 of a yard, depending on the which ones they would suggest for the larger blooms. So I think as a a
Mm.
lover of fabric design and fabrics, and I think anyone else could say this too, that's the most difficult part is what we call fussy cutting the flowers out of the
Yeah.
fabric. Stuart, you probably know that term
I do.
as a
Yes,
quilter.
it's where you've got your
Oh,
half a meter of fabric or half a yard, and how
yes.
much do you go for that bit and cut that bit out, or do you go for that bit and cut that bit out?
Mhm.
So in fact, I have a sample of like what a piece would look like after you fussy cut it, and it looks
Okay,
like
that
this,
looks
right?
familiar.
Wow.
So here we
Yes,
are.
that's all your
And what
leftovers. Yeah.
and
That's
what our
lovely.
filters
Yeah.
will say is, oh my goodness, look at all what's left over. What are you going to do with that? So I have saved all of my
Brilliant.
pieces, of course, because somewhere,
Naturally.
somehow I am going to use these pieces.
Yeah.
It would just be, yeah, wrong not to. So I have a collection of all my scraps, but
Keep that in a
that's how,
box.
Yeah, keep them all.
Let's go to
Don't
this
get rid of
picture
any.
because I know we've got some pictures of your process for this quilt that you're going to show us. Let's go before we get to that one. Let's go to this one because there's the fabric there. So,
yes.
is that you've cut? Is that bigger? I've got this pen here, so I can see bigger bits of fabric there, but here I can see, have you then fussy cut that down to 10-inch squares or what's going on there?
Yes. So those are 8 inch and then 8 inch squares.
Okay.
And then with that, the smaller, it's a border of smaller squares, and those are 4 1/4.
Oh,
So
lovely.
that's why you can work with a number of different parts of this fabric for those smaller squares and for the larger. But they recommend going for your larger squares first, so
Yeah.
you have your bigger blooms.
And
And
and that allows the fabric to sing then, because I know the point of patchwork, which we laugh about, is cutting up lots of fabric into little pieces and then sewing it all
yes,
back together again. And sometimes you're like you've got some lovely fabric and you just can't do it because you want to show the fabric off. So I'm a big fan of just 10-inch squares. I'll cut my fabric into 10-inch squares, sew them all together and let the fabric sing. And actually that's in essence what you've done, isn't it? You've fussy cut it to 8-inch and then you've got these lovely squares. Let me show the next one. So where is that? Well, that's before we get, because that looks like it's nearly finished. You've started putting them up. Where is it? There. So
yes.
you've put them up on the wall, which is lovely because you can get a good feel about that. How have you done that? How
Right.
have you made that wall?
So they recommend, I mean, of course, everyone has their different versions of this, but there is a thin type, almost styrofoam type material that you can purchase at the local hardware store here in the States. And I ended up doing one where you could fold in half so I could fit it into my craft room, the room that we're in today. um, and then just look at this wall as I'm creating the squares at my desk. This way I can just pin them up. I've covered it with a felt. I took a gray felt and just covered it.
Oh, I
Okay.
see.
And the
Okay,
fabric can
yeah.
literally just stay on there without even pinning it. So it's really a
Right.
great visual to
Oh, so
bring
you
the
can
colors
stick it,
together.
you stick it right on the felt and
Right
it
on
just,
the
it
felt.
adheres. Oh,
Right
that's
on the
clever.
felt, it
It's
does. Yeah. So that was a great idea because
absolutely.
otherwise you're left with, I mean, I know everyone has their different techniques. Some have laid them on the, the floor or whatever, but this to me was a great way to
Mm.
visually see the blooms. How many have I incorporated? What colors do I need next?
Mhm.
And yeah, so that really came in handy
I
for me.
bet. I
And
could
then also
imagine
seeing my
you
progress.
moved many of those blocks around over and over again.
That is the understatement.
Um,
Yes.
Stuart,
So,
I've got a question here.
Go on.
Are there any rules that you need to follow when you're setting color adjacent to other colors, is
There
this
are
all your
many.
design, Louisa?
There are many. Good question, Carol. There are many. But the more you follow, the more you can get bogged down with it because some of the rules start going quite scientific, where you take a picture of it, put it onto your computer, and take out, is it the saturation or something, to almost black and white, so you can see if one square has a higher punch than another square, and that can then take an awful lot of work. So I just want to see what I like. That's what I do. And most importantly, perhaps the only rule is leave it a day or an afternoon, go out of the room and then come back in again. Because I bet when you had them in what you thought, Louisa, was the finished order, I bet you left for a day, came back in and went, oh, that orange one's a bit, and then just randomly moved one, didn't you?
so many times.
Yeah.
More times than I'd like to remember. But yes, they would all be laid out, and you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And I had extra squares, of course. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this needed a little bit more of this color in it. And that was the fun part, obviously. You just
Oh, obviously, yeah,
See,
because
look
there's
at that.
endless combinations,
Indeed.
you
endless
know,
combinations.
yeah.
And
And then you go to look at everyone's version of this quilt, because as I mentioned, Carol, this is a very popular one. And then you want to maybe incorporate a color that didn't come with the kit. So that included, maybe buying a couple charm packs and bringing
Oh,
in
I
a little
oh, I
bit
see.
more of,
see.
a little bit more of some
Yeah.
other colors.
Did
So
you
that was
find you did
something
that, or did you stick with the fabric you'd got in the kit?
No, I actually did do that. I
Did.
did find a few charm packs that had 10-inch squares,
Yeah.
and there were some florals in it. Not the whole pack was floral, but there was some florals in it that I'm like, oh, this would be a fun combination with what I'm working with.
I
So
bet.
thank you, Etsy. Etsy was, my go-to, or any online
And I
service.
expect it, though those extra ones you got were a different colorway as well, but in the same family, but probably enough to give it a bit more of a punch. Because I'm looking at these fabrics, and actually, I don't know whether we can guess what was different, but already I'm seeing this beautiful purple one here. It's got a little bit of oomph to it, which helps because when you look at these ones, they do tend to just merge all in, don't they? So you've cleverly put some of these sort of darker ones around to give a bit of a punch. And I suppose that's what you did then with the extra ones, was it?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the daisy that you circled there is you're spot on. That is one of the ones from the charm pack. And then just bringing in some of those. I'm a fan of the turquoises and the blues, and there wasn't enough of those. And
Yeah.
like you said,
There's a bright blue in the top row.
Isn't it? Isn't it beautiful?
Which is just
Yes,
really,
very
really
But then it
pops.
kind of
but I stayed with the cat.
it then works with that one too, doesn't it? So and it just adds another element to it. And you just keep doing that until you're happy. So you then kept going and going and going, and until you had pretty much that. When you look at that, that is
That is stunning.
Thank
Just
you.
stunning.
Thank you so much. And
And
of course,
But it doesn't have the border on it yet, does it? It doesn't have your smaller squares on
it
it
may
yet.
not have the smaller ones on there yet on that picture. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
let's
Yeah,
before
so
we get
that
to
in
the
itself-
finished picture, Louisa, tell us how you came to then sew all those squares together, because I know there are many different ways of doing that. Did you have a particular method, and what method was that?
Right. So I mean, of course, I followed, I went on YouTube and see how everyone else was doing it. So once you've laid it out and you are committed to your layout, I started across. So what they suggested doing is sewing rows across. And then with that, correct, yeah. And then I press the seams to one side, so to the right,
Yeah.
for instance. And then when I went to the next row, those were pressed to the left, so the seams could,
Yeah.
Okay.
yes, so everything could, I don't, what's the word for that? There is a word for
Well,
it.
the join, the juncture is going to match
Correct.
up.
Yeah,
Very,
yeah.
yeah,
I know
exactly.
we like calling it the junction. In the quilting world, we call it nesting our seams,
That's the word. That's the
Oh, okay.
nesting the seams. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
and
So
it's a
that's how it
wonderful
was done.
process, because it makes it you, because obviously the junction. Can I zoom in? And I know quilters will know this. If you're not a quilter, let's just do this a bit more. The junction points are all these, aren't they? You see.
Correct.
And ideally, in the patchwork quilting world, we want them crisp and sharp, don't we? We want those lines to go all the way down and all the way across, and we want that cross there. And I know
Yeah,
once
perfect
we've
match.
quilted it, technically those junctions will almost be invisible. But as a patchworker, we get a bit het up with those junction points. So nesting is a really great way, with the seams going one way, the seams going the other way. When you bring those seams together, they can't move, because because you know what, we've talked about this before. When you can I draw it this way? You've got it's a bit like this. That if I'm looking straight on at the fabric, because you've got a seam here and we've folded that round to the back, there's kind of a little hill there, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah, there would be if you've got seams going opposite. Yes, there
Absolutely.
would be.
And that's how
Yeah.
we use that little hill to our advantage, because we then put the next fabric the other way on top. And that's the nesting principle, because the hill stops the fabric moving either way. So it almost locks it into place.
yes.
You then don't need any pins. But I don't know, Louisa, did you still pin, or did you just go with that?
Well, I don't know if you use these, Stuart, but these are very popular here. Is the clips.
Oh,
the clips have been
absolutely.
Oh, right.
go
Yeah.
to. The pins, I mean, very rarely. I mean, these are great
Yeah,
little tools.
fabric clips.
This is
Absolutely.
the clip, yeah, excellent.
I see a lot of those being used in the sewing bee just for the dressmaking.
Oh, so also dressmaking,
Yeah.
really? Yeah.
I've never used them.
Yeah.
And I probably don't even need to, but I can see where I can see where, especially if you've got layers and layers of fabric, that they would come in handy.
Right, let's
Correct,
go
yeah.
to the finished quilt. So there's the finished quilt, but we've got a little video for you here, and you'll love this. Right, let's get rid of these. Let's get rid of that, and let's get rid of these ones. So hide all these. The one I'm pushing lots of buttons. Here we go, and then. And the big reveal, everyone.
go.
So Louisa's sewn them all together, and then we're going to talk about quilting next. Look at this. That is huge.
Very
Wow.
satisfying.
So
Yeah, what
unbelievable. So now we can see the squares there. They're your 8-inch squares. And then we can see this magnificent border of the 4 1/4 inches. Now, did you make them into? You've sewed them together. Are they like that? Are they? You sewed
You're
1, 2,
absolutely
3,
right,
4.
yes.
squares together to make a big block?
Did a 4-patch, yeah. Now they recommended 4 1/4 to cut them, but I felt, and I don't know if this was just a happy mistake that I did, but I believe I cut them at 4 1/2, which gave me some room to trim them properly so that these squares were perfectly where I wanted them to be. But
good idea.
I don't know why it just happened that way, but yeah, and you're correct. The 4 square, and then put them as part of my sewing, the rows.
Absolutely.
The rows.
Now, you then you've made it. So in the quilting world or the patchwork world, we'd call that a topper. Now, there are many quilters who are toppers only and won't want to do the quilting. Tell us about what you are. Are you a quilter, or did you go, oh no, I'm going to send it off for an expert to do it? What did you do?
I am absolutely, I'm the second of those.
Me too. I'm with you.
I've enjoyed the process of making the topper, and the local quilt shop introduced me to a lovely lady that is the long arm quilter. Her name is Becky, and she is the second half of that process. Yes, absolutely. She's been wonderful. Yeah. With that being said, when Becky
What is this? What is a long arm? What is this long arm quilter? I'm sorry, picturing a person with 10 feet arm.
It's pretty much like that, isn't it?
Oh, we're talking lingo. Sorry.
Did you go to the circus?
Oh my goodness. Stuart, do you want to take this one or?
Yeah. Okay. So, that quilt, is that the quilt you've got there? Is that yours there, Louisa, that we're talking about? Yes. So if you just try and hold that up, imagine trying to put that through your machine to quilt, Carol. It will be so hard.
A bit tricky.
Because look at it all. And see, look, yeah. So imagine trying to quilt that and then it looks fabulous though. Oh.
But I see a different pattern on top of that, don't I?
Exactly.
I'm seeing some kind of a random.
Yeah.
You might see the pattern even better on the back. So yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I can. Yes, it's floral. Oh, wow. So it's not just a template. She's actually gone round all the flowers and everything.
She chose, when she sees the topper, she'll give me a call, and then we'll discuss what she would recommend.
Oh, cool.
And I felt like this one needed a little bit more, working. And she did use a floral design. I wish you could see what she chose, but
we can see a little bit, but it is difficult. But that's the beauty of quilting as well, because you at this point you want your fabric to sing and not your quilting to sing, really, don't you?
Yes.
Or fine balance.
But there's an extra texture on that really enhances it.
Yeah. So, and then also what she is wonderful at and things you don't really think about as just doing the topper was, first of all, what batting to use, and we chose like a thin wool.
Yeah.
And she just said it's wonderful, even it'll keep you cool and keep you warm, and so this was her recommendation, and this is what we went with. And then the thread color, which you don't really think about, but she really wanted to make sure that the thread color made sense for all the fabrics, what would look best, and then on the backing, so it wouldn't look too busy on the back.
So what did you go for then? Because when you look at that quilt down there like that, you can't use a red thread, can you, or a blue thread? So what did you do? Neutral?
Well, she actually went with a light turquoise.
And
it blends well with the back, and you really don't even realize it. I wish I could show you closer, but it works well with all the colors, even the reds. So it's in there. And
what was your binding? Let's just go to your close-up. Is your binding scrappy binding?
The binding was part of the kit.
Oh, yes.
So they suggested this, again, same designer, same fabric, but this beautiful red. And I believe it was just a great frame. This is actually what the fabric looks like.
It works really well because the black makes everything pop a bit more, doesn't it?
Yes, yes. It
Absolutely.
frames it, doesn't it? Now,
Absolutely.
with the long arm machine, is it like a sewing machine where you
Oh,
have
yes.
a top thread and a bobbin thread and
We were saying about that, weren't we? So rather than Louisa putting it through her sewing machine and having all that fabric fighting, there's your sewing machine there, and you've got all this fabric, and then turning it around to do some fancy floral design. It would be really hard. If Louisa really wants to quilt it easily, then we would just do long lines, straight line quilting. That's what I'm a big fan of. But a long armour is somewhere that has this massive space and this machine with two rollers either end, and the quilt is rolled right out. And this long arm, if I draw it like this on the TV. I'm drawing it flat, and then you've got this sewing machine in the middle here that has a really long arm, or what we would call in the sewing industry the throat, a really long throat space. So it comes out like this, and there's the needle, but there's these handles, and you can move it up and down and forward and back, and like this, and the needle's going, and it's like you're a driver. And you can either design it and follow the florals and lines and do it, or you can program the computer to do a template that it repeats over and over and over and over again. It's phenomenal. And if you want your quilt to look amazing, I'm all up for it, Louisa. You send it off to a long armour who can do it, and you pay them, and you get this phenomenal quilt back, and you just keep them making the tops and enjoy that sewing process of making the tops.
Exactly. Thank
so
you.
and again, so there's two threads. Does it work like a sewing machine, Louisa,
Absolutely.
where you have the upper and the lower thread? So you could choose two different colors if you wanted to.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, but you had the same thread in the upper and the lower. They were both turquoise.
We did, yes.
Right?
And I take her expertise advice any day, just
Agreed.
knowing how many quilts she's done and what she would
Right.
recommend.
Okay.
I really just went with her advice, and it paid off. She did a beautiful job, and yes.
And
I
she put the
definitely-
binding on
Wow.
as well, and then you finished it off.
I believe she has someone else that does the binding, and I wish I had that person's name and give them the credit, but I believe she does the quilting portion and then sends it off for the binding.
So did you
I'm
finish
not
it off
sure.
by hand, or did the other person finish all the binding off?
The other person. the
Yeah,
other person.
lovely, brilliant.
Mm.
That's right.
Right?
And that's
So
the thing. You know this.
I had the best of all of that.
And that's where I think you find what you like to do, and that's why I said at the beginning, are you a quilt topper only or a quilter? Because I'm very much the same. I'll just enjoy the sewing process. The quilting process is a different thing entirely, isn't it? And for some, not as enjoyable.
Right. And maybe one day I'll maybe go there, but from start to finish. But as of right now, I felt like if I could, I wanted to see that, I'm just one for gratification. I wanted to see that quilt done and done properly, especially after all the time you take to do the topper.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's definitely the way I might even go forward for a while with it, but maybe one day. I've seen those.
Well, you can
I've seen those
see.
machines, and they're very intimidating. So I don't know how I'll go there, but I know people, so they can do it for me.
Oh, what an effort! And Louisa, are you sharing these new skills with other people? Are you involved in any kind of cross, sharing of this?
Oh.
And are you teaching anyone to sew? Are you
I am. I'm a grandmother. So with that being said, my granddaughter is close to 4, very opinionated, and I love her to death. She's a crafter by
lovely.
nature. So I just love crafting with her. She loves my sewing room. She's intrigued by everything in the sewing room, as you might think, the threads and the buttons and the fabrics, and when she's not quite ready to sew yet, but she is, how do you like my project so far? And I'll show her, and
lovely.
she'll be all about what color she likes best. And So that's fun. And then I have a grandson also that is like close to 9. Well, actually he is 9, and he's shown an interest in sewing. And
Fantastic.
we found something that I'm like, well, how can I introduce a 9-year-old to like getting comfortable with a sewing machine and sewing? And I remembered as a child, or maybe however old I was, there used to be those sewing panels, Carol. Do you remember?
Mhm.
Oh,
Where,
they're very
Oh,
fashionable.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly, the sewing panels.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
Spoonflower, I just did a little browse through that website, and there are designers that are making them. So I showed this to him, and he's excited because it's a simple enough project to do, right? So you've
Oh,
got
lovely.
the
There. Yeah. Lovely.
right, and he can make a pillow, he can cut it out. There's little areas to cut out. He can get comfortable
Little
with
bits of
the sewing
instruction
machine.
on there, I imagine.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the sewing machine will be easy enough just to go around the lines, and then we can stuff it as a pillow, and he will have finished his project. So
Oh, that's
I think
wonderful.
it's just a good introduction to it, right? To kind of not so intimidating with
Absolutely.
anything more.
And are you going to make them quilts? Because I have to say, for your first quilt, you went big. Most people start off with little crib quilts for grandchildren. So,
Oh my goodness, yeah,
Oh.
I am. And this one I don't know. This one might stay mine for a while,
I
but
think so.
oh gosh, the quilting and just anything I create, I think for the quilts in particular, you find your resources online. Of course, I've gone to where I don't know, Stuart, if the pre-cut quilts are out there.
Absolutely.
Obviously.
Huge
Yeah.
fashion. It's just because it's quicker. You fall in love with a pre-cut selection and you go, oh, I've got to have it, and you buy it and it's in your cupboard. So have you got lots of charm packs and layer cakes and jelly rolls now?
Yes, as you
I can see.
Look at that.
Look.
Here's my jelly rolls, which these will probably never get opened because they're just kind of like, again, that
Too pretty.
design that we were speaking of.
They're very pretty sculptures, just in their own right, aren't they?
I think, Louisa, we need to challenge you to make a jelly roll quilt, because that's normally where everyone starts. So crack open one of those jelly rolls and sew all the strips together.
Yeah, untie that thing. Yeah,
I did open one, but it wasn't that designer. And I am doing, as Carol, I may have showed her the jelly roll rug.
Lovely!
So that has been fun. It's actually right here next to me on my sewing machine as we speak. But yeah, just taking your batting and your fabric that you've taken and made a long.
And see that gadget, Stuart, that Louisa is
so
added.
cool.
It's like one of the bias,
Yeah, and it makes doing that jelly roll rug so much easier, doesn't it?
Yeah. Look at that. Oh, you're well on your way. Look at there.
Not too bad. Believe it or not.
Practically done.
Right.
I will put the link down in the description for anyone wanting to look at the jelly roll rug, because it was a big thing. Well, it has been for the last sort of 2 years, hasn't it? And I know.
Has it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And very fun to make. And then you've got this lovely looking rug, in your hall or in your study or in the toilet or wherever.
Yeah, that's going to be the challenging part, is making the actual rug. I've been watching the YouTube videos, as we talked about.
Absolutely.
And just the challenge of getting that together. But I'm looking forward to it. It's fun. It's a fun project. And again, just, following those creatives online, and you're just like, wow, that looks fun. I think I can do that. And
the resources are amazing out there. And you can also refine your question. It doesn't have to be a big general. You could just say, how do you do this thing exactly? And there's a string of YouTube videos for just that,
You're absolutely right.
But
You're absolutely right.
I'm so glad to hear you say that you're teaching your grandchildren, because, and keep it in the family like that. It's one of my earliest memories, and it really sent me on my way. So I'm really glad to hear that from you, Louisa.
Absolutely. And I was hoping my grandchildren would like crafting, and I told my son, I said, I've manifested this, this, right? I've wanted crafting to share my crafts with them, and they love it.
Well, thank you for sharing your craft with us. Let's take one look at this amazing quilt. The size of that. It's just brilliant. And I reckon you're going to go on and do some. Well, you've already got ideas. You're going to be doing log cabins. You're going to be doing jelly rolls and all sorts, aren't you? So it's wonderful that you've come on and shared that with us, because I know we've got so many. Well, we've been talking about sewing for the last 4 years, haven't we, Carol? And sewing, we've got many people who sew, dressmake, who quilt, who patchwork, who make all sorts of things, haven't we, Carol?
Love it.
Well, we have, and I was reading the comments today after last week's show, and they're all so favorable and energized and everything. But there are occasionally that somebody will come up and say, you know, I'm just a beginner and I don't know what to do next, or I only have the basic skills despite being on and off with sewing for so many years. Well, this is something, wouldn't you say, Louisa, that with basic skills you can build something this magnificent? And I think this is going to it's going to inspire our audience, Stuart. I'm sure of it.
Thank you. That is so sweet. But you're absolutely right. I mean, sometimes you just get away from doing the things you love just because the everyday life gets in the way. Absolutely. So when you can get back into those creative times and, you know, throw a podcast on or throw a video on and just get on the sewing machine and do whatever. No one has to, you know, no one has to judge. Just go ahead and just.
That's right. And I think the project of making a quilt, Stuart and Louisa, you might both agree that it is something you can leave for a bit and come back to. Absolutely. You can do it in smaller portions. So, you know, and that's one thing that sewing will teach you, this life skill. It's all about patience, isn't it? Absolutely. You don't have to finish everything at once.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Let that be an inspiration.
Oh, it's been wonderful. Well, you've been a huge inspiration because you went right in at the deep end with a huge kit and cut all that fabric. So that says it all, doesn't it? You don't have to. You go with what you like, and you like that fabric, and you made that kit. You didn't start off with a small crib quilt and then work your way up. And I think that's even more inspirational. Absolutely. So thank you very much for your time. We're gonna finish there now and drop back to our other. Well, it's week 4. We're talking about now in the sewing bee, and we'll hopefully see how you go. And if you finish the quilt, you'll have to send us some pictures of it.
I will.
Please do.
Absolutely.
Please do.
This has been great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Louisa, say hi to Michigan for me. All right.
Oh, thank you. Hello from Michigan. Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.